Hey guys, tonight we're heading back, way back. You're standing barefoot on a soft, dry hill just east of the Tiber River. It's not Rome yet. Not even close. There are no roads here, no temples, no triumphant arches or marble domes. Just dust, grass, and a few lazy sheep chewing cud like they know something you don't. In the distance, a few huts blink under the sun like shy mushrooms. This isn't the Rome of emperors and orgies. It's the Rome of fresh air, awkward stone piles, and the occasional mosquito. And tonight, you're going to watch it all rise. Slowly, gently, brick by dusty brick. You probably won't survive this, not from danger, but from sheer relaxation. Trust me, by the time this ancient city even gets a bathhouse, you'll be halfway to dreamland. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment with where you're tuning in from and what time it is. Always fun to see who else is dozing off beside you around the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand in this not yet Rome, watching as a few shaggy figures trudge up the hill with ropes, sticks, and a very rickety cart pulled by a cow that looks like he's regretting his life choices. They speak in early Latin, but it's mostly gestures and sighs. One of them points to the ground, draws a rough square in the dirt with a stick, then steps back like he's just created the universe. This is the Forum. Well, the spot where it will be. Someday. Right now, it's more bare patch of ground that smells faintly of goat. Historians still argue whether this spot was chosen for military strategy or just because it had the best morning sun. Either way, here's where the magic starts. Not with trumpets or declarations, but with measuring cords made of flax and two guys arguing over which direction is more sacred. A small pile of stones is brought in, unremarkable rocks that don't sparkle, don't chisel easily, and definitely won't impress the gods. But that's fine. No one's here to impress. They're here to build. The first stone is laid with a grunt and a sneeze. A little girl nearby claps. Her dog barks, then immediately regrets it. The builders wipe their hands on their tunics, look at the stone like it might explode, and then nod. It doesn't explode. Victory. You walk beside them as they continue, the sun lazily sliding toward the horizon. They chat about dinner, boiled barley again, and whether or not one of them accidentally insulted Jupiter earlier by tripping over a sacred goose. There's laughter. There's dust. A bird lands on the corner of the foundation and poops. Everyone pretends not to notice. One mainstream historical fact. Early Roman settlements like this began with careful land division, often using a ritual plow drawn by oxen to mark sacred boundaries. But here, it's just a stick and good intentions. You crouch beside the growing shape of a wall, just knee-high so far, and run your fingers over the rough edges. The stone is warm from the sun. There's no hurry, No contractors barking deadlines, no budget spreadsheets. Just patient, steady effort. One stone, then another. Then one that doesn't quite fit. They hammer it anyway. Nearby, a young man picks up a stone too big for him. He groans. He wobbles. He drops it. Another man picks it up like it's a loaf of bread. The boy rolls his eyes, and you're watching the very first Roman gym session. Us protein powder hasn't been invented yet, but Iago certainly has. As dusk begins to wrap itself around the hill, a faint orange glow paints the stones. A woman arrives carrying a small basket of figs. The builders thank her, take a few, and pass the rest around. One of them offers you one. It's sweet, earthy, and just the tiniest bit overripe. Perfect. A fringe tidbit. Early Roman fig varieties were sometimes fermented into a rudimentary wine. Not great, but enough to take the edge off when your job is stack rocks until your back screams. A few torches are lit, their flames flickering like sleepy fireflies. Work slows. The cart creaks back down the hill, the cow even more disgruntled than before. Everyone sits on half-finished walls, eating figs, sipping something vaguely alcoholic, and discussing which god might be least offended if they accidentally build the latrines facing the sunrise. You lie back on the grass, gazing up at the indigo sky, the stars just beginning to blink on like hesitant candles. The city isn't built yet, not even close. But the shape of it is here, in rope lines, in chalk marks, in laughter and stone dust and half-eaten figs. Tomorrow they'll build more. But tonight, they rest, and so do you. You wake, or rather, drift upward through the gentle haze of imagined sleep to find the builders already at work. The sun's just risen, spilling gold across the dewy grass, and someone is swatting lazily at a wasp that insists the olive oil jar is a good place to dive. It's quieter this morning. The city is still barely a breath in the dust, but the rhythm has begun. You hear it in the steady clack of wood on stone, in the muted conversations punctuated by yawns, and in the rustling tunics of people doing what people always do, trying to make something that lasts. You follow a pair of workers dragging a crude cart laden with mortar. Their sandals slap against the damp earth, leaving odd little footprints behind, half tread, half smear. One of them is humming something off-key that you can only assume is the ancient Roman version of a Taylor Swift chorus. Maybe. Their first task, aligning the next layer of bricks for what might one day be a house or a tavern, or, given the smell coming from somewhere nearby, a public restroom. Each brick is set with both care and resignation. It's hard work, but it's also soothing in its own way. You try not to trip over a loose pile of clay that's pretending to be a wall. One historical fact: the Romans were among the first to perfect the use of concrete, opus caementicium, mixed with volcanic ash, which made their buildings far more durable than the ones made purely of stone. But today, it's still just packed earth and elbow grease. You settle beside a group of women shaping tiles under a canvas sheet stretched between wooden poles. Their hands move fast, fingers smoothing clay with the same grace they'd use to braid a daughter's hair. The sun is already warming the air, making the clay dry faster than they'd like. But they joke about it. One woman claims the gods are cooking their projects on purpose, just to hurry them along. Fringe Tidbit: some ancient Roman construction crews swore by singing in specific rhythms while working, almost like early work chants, to sync their movements and, some believed, to confuse the evil spirits hiding in the mortar. There's a sudden shout. A goat has wandered into the half-built street and is munching contentedly on someone's sandal. The owner of said sandal does not find it amusing. The goat disagrees. You find a nearby stone to sit on and watch the argument unfold. The goat wins. The smell of fresh bread drifts in from a tented stall where a young baker is experimenting with her family's recipe: less salt, more honey. You get the sense that today's batch might either become a beloved tradition or a legendary disaster. You imagine future Romans debating whether honey loaves originated here, or if this baker simply misunderstood the difference between sugar and bees. Historians still argue whether the early Roman settlements followed a strict city grid from the very beginning, or if they evolved more haphazardly, shaped by hills, winds, and the occasional divine nudge. Looking around now, it's clearly the latter. One path curves for no reason. A hut is being built directly in the middle of what was supposed to be a main street. Everyone shrugs. City planning, Roman style. A man with a long beard, either a sage or just someone who lost his razor, leans over a makeshift map scratched into a wooden plank. He mutters about the cardinal directions, the wind gods, and whether the tavern should be closer to the temple or the bakery. He pauses, stares off into space, then decides it should be between both. A sacred sandwich of convenience. You trail a young apprentice carrying a basket of tools, chisels, mallets, a string line that's tangled in ways that defy the laws of geometry. He drops a hammer, nearly loses a toe, and mutters what you can only assume is the ancient equivalent of "seriously?" You offer to help. He doesn't see you, of course, but you follow him anyway. Along the edge of the developing plaza, there's a man engraving patterns into a cornerstone. He's carving tiny symbols, some geometric, others animalistic. You ask silently if these have meaning. He answers to no one. I just think it looks nice. You nod. Good enough. You pass under a framework of wooden beams, lashed together with rawhide and prayer. One builder is trying to balance on top while setting tiles. You hold your breath. He holds his. The beam creaks. He finishes. Everyone exhales. Another brick is laid. Another day of dust and laughter added to the growing myth of this place. You sit in the shade beside the form-to-be and nibble on a fig someone left unattended. It's a little squishy. So are you. Time slows. The city grows, not in leaps or monuments, but in modest, rhythmic effort. There's a kind of sacredness to it. No one's calling it Rome yet, but you are. You rise slowly, brushing imaginary dust from your tunic, and take a lazy stroll past the half-formed outlines of homes, shops, and roads. Everything smells of clay and morning sweat, tinged with the slightly sour tang of last night's leftover wine spilled into the dirt. You step over a wooden beam that's been dragged across the path and find yourself face to face with the city's first and only well. It's more of a hole. Really. A ring of stones surrounding a deep shaft with a creaky bucket system that appears to require the strength of 2 oxen and the patience of a saint. A small boy is assigned to the bucket. He mutters every time it slips. His job is thankless. He knows it. You know it. But someone has to keep the mortar mixed and the tile makers hydrated. Nearby, a group of elders sits on crates under a fig tree, arguing loudly about nothing in particular. One claims the temple should face the sun. Another insists it must face the river. A third thinks it should face the best acoustics, so prayers sound impressive. None of them agree. This, you realize, is the birth of Roman politics, shouting, figs, and wildly unprovable claims. You watch a woman sharpening a tool on a whetstone. She hums a strange tune with no words, her eyes fixed on the blade. It's for cutting marble, she says. Not enemies, but you suspect it could do both. Her arms are corded with muscle from years of chipping away at the world. A small bronze pendant hangs from her neck. An eagle, slightly lopsided, but proud. Mainstream historical fact: Roman cities were usually planned with a central forum, surrounded by key structures such as basilicas, markets, and bathhouses, though in the early stages. It all began with the placement of a few important public spaces and lots of improvisation. What you're witnessing now? Total improvisation. Further down the path, a boy runs past with a bundle of reeds tied like a broom. He's sweeping the dust, but mostly just moving it around. An older man, likely his grandfather, tells him stories about when he helped build another city far to the west. The boy pretends to listen. He's more interested in the lizard sunbathing on a half-finished wall. Fringe Tidbit? Romans sometimes used crushed animal bones in their concrete mixtures. Whether it added strength or was just available at the time is still debated. Either way, it makes the phrase, "a city built on sacrifice," a bit more literal. You duck into a shaded tent where artisans are painting frescoes for what will be a small temple. The pigments are ground from local minerals: burnt umber, sienna, and a blue so vivid it might have been squeezed from the sky itself. One painter sneezes and ruins a dove's wing. "Now it's a bat," he said. Everyone laughs. Outside, workers struggle with a column. It's their first attempt at something grand. They roll it on logs, stop every few feet, argue about angle, then continue. A few younger laborers lift their arms as if conducting an orchestra, timing the grunts and pushes in rhythmic unity. Someone even starts a chant. You can't help but hum along. You pause at a corner where someone is carving street names into slabs. They don't yet have names for the streets. so the engraver improvises. Path of goat, market turn, short walk to bread. You imagine tourists in the far future wondering about these names, snapping photos, and assuming they held deep spiritual meaning. Historians still argue whether the early cities were built with symbolic alignments to celestial bodies, or just followed the curve of rivers and the shade of nearby trees. Standing here, you suspect the truth is both. People need meaning, but they also need shade. A young woman approaches the well, balancing a clay jug on her head. She doesn't wobble, not once. Everyone clears a path as if she were royalty. She lowers the jug, fills it, then disappears into the dusty horizon. You imagine she's going to a grandmother or a garden, maybe both, and she leaves no footprints, just a faint hush of grace. You hear the clanging of bronze. Someone's making a bell. You follow the sound and see a craftsman pouring molten metal into a mold shaped like a lion's head. He shrugs. "Why not?" he says. "It's loud." You cover your ears. The craftsman smiles, proud of his tiny roar. Nearby, an old man naps beside a half-built wall, a wide-brimmed hat covering his face. A dog sleeps beside him, twitching through dreams of chasing something he probably wouldn't catch. You wonder if the man is dreaming about the city finished, bustling, eternal. Or maybe he's dreaming of lunch. You step away from the bustle and find yourself back at the fig tree. The elders are still arguing, but now they've turned to debating the exact number of gods who oversee construction. 7, says one. 12, says another. It's definitely 4, mumbles the fig-munching skeptic. As you sit again, the sun shifts, casting long shadows across the beginnings of something remarkable. It's not much to look at yet. A street here, a wall there, some grand plans carved into the dirt. But you feel it. The promise, the steady heartbeat of a city waking up. You're back on your feet again, brushing off a layer of fine dust that seems to settle on everything. The air smells like wet clay, warm iron, and the lingering traces of olive oil from someone's lunch. Ahead, a group of builders is gathered around a trench where the foundation stones are being lowered, one by one, with ropes and a chorus of grunts. This, you realize, is the Roman version of team building. The stones themselves are massive, quarried from nearby hills, shaped by hand, and engraved with tiny notches so they fit together like puzzle pieces. One builder, a wiry man with a crooked grin, pats each stone before it's placed. "You've got to talk to them," he says. "Stones like being spoken to." You nod seriously, unsure whether he's joking or a prophet. Mainstream historical fact: Roman engineers were meticulous about laying foundations. They often dug deep trenches and layered them with gravel and lime before placing stone. Because even the mightiest empire knows you don't build greatness on a shaky floor. Someone unrolls a map, if you can call it that. It's more like a giant slab of bark with lines scratched in charcoal. You lean in. There are plans for baths, a public latrine marked with a big smiley face, and even a row of shade trees along the main street. You point to a strange squiggle. That's where the philosophers will loiter, says the mapmaker. Naturally, not far from the trench, an elderly woman sweeps the steps of a temporary forum platform. She's muttering about dust and men who leave footprints. She has a broom made of bundled reeds, tied with a crimson thread. The city may be young, she tells you, but it already disrespects my clean floor. You find yourself apologizing on behalf of Rome. Fringe Tidbit. Romans sometimes buried small animal bones or offerings beneath their buildings as a kind of blessing. Whether this helped or just gave archaeologists something to gossip about, no one knows. You glance toward a suspiciously lumpy patch of earth and wonder who or what is sleeping beneath it. A man nearby is busy chiseling an inscription into the lintel of what will become a bathhouse. He tests each letter with a soft tap, like tuning an instrument. The hammer sings, he says. If it sings too sharp, the stone cracks. He lets you try. You immediately chip the edge. He takes back the chisel and sighs like a disappointed music teacher. You wander next to a group of young boys rolling barrels of sand uphill. They're sweaty, loud, and absolutely delighted to be in charge of something. One insists he's the foreman. The others throw pebbles at him. "We'll be architects," one yells, missing wildly. The future of Rome, you realize, is currently chasing a frog. A line of oxen plods by, dragging timber toward what will be a market hall. One of the drivers hums a tune in a minor key, slow and deliberate. He claims it helps the animals keep time. You watch their ears twitch in rhythm. Even the beasts, it seems, appreciate a good soundtrack. At the far edge of the construction site, a group of laborers has set up a makeshift tavern. Just a table under a canopy with a few clay cups and a jug of something suspiciously purple. You're offered a taste. You accept. It's warm, a little vinegary, but not unpleasant. "We call it city wine," someone says, "because it tastes like ambition and regret." You laugh, but then you sip again. Historians still argue whether Roman cities followed strict grid plans from the outset, or whether they grew organically with minor course corrections as needed. Judging by the yelling over a crooked corner post right now, it's probably a bit of both. One man insists it's 10 degrees off. Another blames the wind. A third shrugs and says, "It's Rome." She'll lean where she pleases. You pass a cluster of women weaving baskets out of reeds and rushes. They pause occasionally to gossip about one of the masons. Something about a stolen kiss behind the granary. Their laughter is the same in every century, sharp, knowing, and perfectly timed. One tosses you a finished basket. "For carrying dreams," she says with a wink, toward the center of the site. A raised platform begins to take shape. It's the skeleton of a future basilica, a place where citizens will gather to settle disputes, whisper deals, and pretend they're not eavesdropping. For now, it's mostly scaffolding and 3 determined goats that refuse to leave. You try shoeing them. They bleat in Latin. you find a quiet spot near a stack of unused bricks. Someone scratched a heart into one of them. Below it, 2 initials, encircled with a laurel wreath. You smile. Even among sawdust and sweat, romance insists on carving out space. You trace the letters with your finger, wondering if that couple's story will survive the centuries, or if it's already been rewritten. The sun is beginning to dip low again, casting the city in a golden haze. Everything looks soft, half-finished, like a dream that's starting to make sense. You sit on the edge of a foundation stone and stretch your legs. Nearby, someone starts singing. It's off-key, full of joy, and just loud enough to make a few pigeons flap away. In this moment, surrounded by mortar dust and the clatter of hammers, you don't just see a city, you feel it. You hear it hum. Rome is rising, not with grandeur or thunder, but with small hands, shared stories, and one brick at a time. You wake slowly, still seated on the warm foundation stone, the distant hammering having lulled you into a brief doze. Your legs are a little numb, your palms dusted with grit. The city around you hasn't paused, not even for a second. Rome never sleeps. It only rearranges its rhythm. Your next steps take you toward a long, narrow trench where aqueducts are being laid. Stone channels curved just right, angled precisely to coax water from far-off springs into this newborn city. One engineer is so focused on his calculations that he doesn't notice he's dipped the wrong end of his stylus into the inks. When you gently point it out, he mutters. Water flows, ink spills, same thing. You decide not to press. Mainstream historical fact. Roman aqueducts were marvels of engineering, using gravity and slight gradients to transport clean water over miles of terrain, sometimes even underground. The sheer precision of their measurements continues to awe engineers today. A boy nearby tests the channel's incline with a handful of olive pits. He lets them roll and nods solemnly when they reach the end without getting stuck. That means the gods approve, he explains. You resist the urge to drop a second handful, just to see if they disagree. As you follow the half-built aqueduct uphill, you pass a group of stonecutters sharpening their tools. The clanging of iron on wet stone rings out in short, rhythmic bursts, like the tapping of a giant spoon on porcelain. One cutter notices your interest and offers a lesson. You can tell a man's worth by his edge, he says. A dull blade tells no good stories. You're not sure if he means the tool or the person. You pause to admire a newly completed arch. Its keystone freshly set and adorned with the image of a winged lion. No one can explain why a lion has wings. It looked majestic. The artist shrugs. That's reason enough. You suppose that's as valid as any divine symbol. Historians still argue whether early Roman imagery borrowed more from Greek myth or Etruscan folklore. But one thing's certain. Wings make everything more impressive. Beneath the arch, a parade of carts rumbles by, filled with tiles, marble fragments, an amphora of what you're told is very dry wine. One driver points to a barrel and says, "Careful, that one bites." You're unsure whether he's joking. You give it a respectful distance either way. The builders have started laying streets now, paving stones so smooth you almost slip. Workers toss sand into the cracks to help them settle. One claims the best roads are the ones that whisper underfoot. You try walking softly. It sounds like a polite sigh. Maybe that's the whisper. Fringe Tidbit. Roman streets often had built-in drainage systems, sometimes with tiny underground tunnels for runoff. More impressively, some roads had built-in speed bumps, raised stones to slow carts in high-traffic areas. You pass one and nearly stub your toe. Ancient traffic enforcement, still effective. At the Forum site, someone is setting up columns, massive, fluted beauties that will one day hold up the ceiling of the law courts. A crane-like wooden contraption groans with the weight of each drum as it's lifted. The man operating it is sunburned, half-shaved, and humming something scandalous. "I raise justice," he announces with a wink. You quietly move on. There's a scent of rosemary and wet mortar in the air. It's coming from a nearby cook station, just a plank balanced between two stones, where a young woman stirs a pot of lentils for the crew. She offers you a taste. It's salty, smoky, and oddly soothing. "We feed empires," she says. "One spoonful at a time." You raise your cup in toast. It feels earned. A group of children skips past, pretending to be senators. One is draped in a bedsheet, proclaiming himself Cicero the Younger. He immediately declares a new law: no naps after lunch. His sister throws a sandal at him. Democracy, you think, is off to a strong start. Historians still argue whether Roman city building followed a universal plan from the top down, or whether each city adapted based on local terrain and whim. Judging by the spontaneous toga debates happening now in the dirt, you're leaning toward the latter. Back at the baths, masons are setting in the first pieces of mosaic tile. It's slow work, delicate, deliberate. One artist pauses to adjust a single red piece by a hair's width. "It matters," she says, "because someone will see it in silence and feel whole again." You stare at the half-finished swirl and believe her. You turn a corner and find yourself in a grove of young olive trees, newly planted between buildings to be. Their silver leaves shimmer in the breeze. A man with ink-stained hands is sketching one of them. "For the city seal," he says. "We should have roots, don't you think?" You nod. Cities, like people, are better with them. Near dusk, the air changes. Cooler, more golden. Shadows lengthen. Somewhere a flute begins to play. Soft. Wandering notes that twist around pillars and through scaffolding. You find yourself slowing down, listening more than walking. As you rest again on a half-carved bench, someone drops a fresh layer of gravel onto the path beside you. It crunches perfectly beneath their boots. "Rome begins in dust," they say, "but not the kind you wipe away, the kind you build on." You sit quietly on the stone bench as the city exhales around you. Every corner now hums with purpose, every clang of bronze, each creak of timber, the rustle of papyrus rolled open for the 5th time today. Yet somehow, this grand construction site feels more like a meditation than a march toward progress. You stretch your legs. They crack like ancient scrolls being unrolled. To your right, a handful of surveyors crouch over a wax tablet, using a curved staff and a piece of string to chart the city's next expansion. One man, squinting dramatically, taps his stylus on the parchment and mutters, "We're off by a goat's length." You try not to ask for clarification. Instead, you watch them shift the entire plan by what seems like a whisper. Mainstream historical fact: Roman cities were often laid out in grid patterns centered around 2 intersecting roads, the Cardo, north-south, and the Decumanus, east-west. This structure gave order to urban life and made expansion more manageable. It also made for excellent parade routes. You wander toward a scaffolding web surrounding the future basilica. It's a skeleton of stone, rope, and creaking wood platforms that sway just slightly in the breeze. A man wearing a dusty linen wrap is climbing to the top, carrying a basket of tiles balanced on his shoulder like he's walking a tightrope. You hold your breath as he moves. He doesn't look down, ever. On the ground below, a woman with a chisel is carving ornate leaf patterns into a cornice fragment. When you compliment the delicate lines, she says, "It's for the gods," or the pigeons. Hard to tell who appreciates it more. You both look up. A pigeon stares back from a ledge, unblinking, judgmental. A short walk away, a public well is being finished, its stone lip polished, its pulley arm newly greased. A young boy tests the bucket, watching it descend slowly into the darkness, then pulling it back up. He sips the water, nods, and proclaims, "Tastes like history." You think he's not wrong. Fringe Tidbit. In some Roman cities, wells were inscribed with curses against anyone who tried to poison or defile the water. One famously read, "May your tongue rot like a neglected turnip." You make a mental note never to offend a Roman well. As you follow a trail of footprints in the dust, you come upon a group painting murals in a small temple portico. The colors are vivid, deep reds, golds, sea greens. A goddess with outstretched arms welcomes all who pass, her eyes wide and faintly mischievous. The painter pauses, brush in mouth, and says, "She's watching whether we clean our sandals." You look down and feel guilty. Across the plaza, a crew is laying out the foundations for the tabernae, rows of future shops where wine, bread, ink, and gossip will one day be exchanged. Right now, it's just piles of bricks and 2 men arguing about whether their stall should face east or slightly eastern. You quietly step away. You wander into a shady grove at the city's edge, where sculptors are chiseling statues. Some are busts of emperors you've never heard of. Others are more experimental. One depicts a man wrestling a dolphin. Allegory, the artist says, nodding seriously. Of taxation. Historians still argue whether Roman sculpture was strictly narrative or also deeply satirical. Apparently, this one's both. Just beyond the grove, you pass a construction supervisor marking tallies on a piece of slate with charcoal. He pauses, scratches out a number, and sighs. Lost track after the 400th brick. You peek at his notes. There's a smiley face next to the number 398. You decide to leave it mysterious. The wind picks up slightly, carrying the scent of pine resin and dust. You spot workers greasing wagon wheels and sanding planks for what will become the city gates. A woman dipping a rag in oil hums a lullaby. It's slow, hypnotic, perfectly timed to the rhythm of her polishing. Nearby, a group of boys practice oration atop stacked crates. One mimics a senator with dramatic flourishes, shouting about cheese tariffs. Another counters by proposing mandatory nap breaks. The crowd of workers cheers. You're inclined to vote yes. Mainstream historical fact. Roman education emphasized rhetoric. Public speaking was a skill prized even among teenagers. The ability to argue persuasively was often more valuable than being correct, which explains a lot, really. Back inside the growing residential quarters, masons are setting bricks with shocking precision, eyeballing gaps to within a grain of sand. One shouts, "No cracks, no drafts," every few seconds. It seems part chant, part threat, part personal affirmation. You try saying it under your breath. It's oddly motivating, and you glance up. Laundry flutters from newly built balconies, tunics, blankets. One pair of particularly dramatic striped socks. A child waves from above. You wave back and nearly trip on a barrel labeled "Future Olives." It's reassuring that even the future is being packed neatly today. In a shaded doorway, a potter sits shaping clay into amphorae. Her hands move like clockwork, her brow furrowed in concentration. "People will drink from these in 10 cities, she says without looking up, or drop them. Either way, worth it. You decide she's your favorite philosopher so far. Historians still argue whether these artisans saw themselves as part of something grand, or merely as survivalists, watching this woman carve her initials, just barely visible, into the base of a jug. You lean toward the former, as twilight begins to stretch its fingers. Lanterns are lit along a newly laid street. Their flicker bathes the stones in liquid gold. Shadows dance. People begin to sit, to stretch, to breathe. It's the kind of moment that says, "We made it, at least for today." You return to your bench, now warm from the setting sun, and close your eyes briefly. Somewhere a hammer drops. Somewhere a child laughs. Somewhere a city continues building itself into memory, and the glow from the lanterns lingers as you rise again, now drawn to the rhythmic pulse of the city at twilight. This is when everything seems to sigh, like even the bricks are exhaling. You head down a side path, barely wider than 2 outstretched arms. where the evening breeze tickles the vines creeping up freshly laid walls. Around the corner, a group of builders lounges on overturned buckets, trading stories and crusts of bread. One gestures wildly with a fig in hand, clearly recounting a grand personal legend involving a runaway ox and a toga mishap. You catch only every third word, but somehow the story lands. They all laugh, cheeks flush with wine and sun. Mainstream historical fact: Roman workers were often paid partially in rations, grain, salt, wine, and olive oil, rather than just coin. It was practical, nutritious, and much harder to spend foolishly at the dice tables. Unless, of course, you traded your olive oil for dice. As you wander further, you find yourself near a partially finished aqueduct. The arches rise like ribs against the darkening sky, the scaffolded bones of civilization's lifeline. A mason walks along the upper path, torch in hand, carefully checking the alignment stones. From down below, it looks like he's walking among the stars. Fringe Tidbit: one aqueduct engineer supposedly carried a live goose while inspecting structures, claiming it would honk if the masonry creaked. The goose eventually retired and lived its final years as a temple mascot. Historians still argue whether the story is apocryphal or just Roman enough to be true. You follow a cart being pulled by a mule with a slightly judgmental expression. Its owner hums as he steers toward the forum, his load covered by woven cloth. You peek as you pass. Bundles of mosaic tiles in shades of blue and gold, glinting like treasure. You resist the urge to pocket one. Past the forum square, the city's skeleton reveals its heart. A series of columns waiting for their lintels. Piles of marble blocks sorted like puzzle pieces, and a lone architect pacing in loops. He mutters calculations, gestures at invisible arches, and finally sketches something in the dust with a stick. It looks like a snail. You assume it's symbolic. You duck into the shadow of a nearly finished domus, a Roman home. Still mostly empty, but smelling of lime wash and possibility. Inside, two artisans argue over the right shade of red for the atrium walls. Blood of Mars, one insists. Sunset over Sicily, the other replies. A third, older worker, simply shrugs and opens another jar. We'll call it compromise. Historians still argue whether Roman interior paint recipes were standardized or uniquely regional. Either way, the smell of wet plaster and pigment mixes with the quiet music of evening, and it's oddly comforting. Outside again, you hear the scrape of sandals on stone. A patrol of vigils, the Roman firefighters and watchmen, passes with torches. One of them yawns. Another waves to a baker pulling late loaves from a street-side oven. The warm smell of anise and honey drifts into the air. Someone claps politely. You pause at the corner where three cats have gathered. They stare at something in the dark. You lean down. It's a turtle. The cats, stunned, back away, slowly. Now you and the turtle exchange a brief, respectful nod. Nearby, a young woman holds a parchment lantern shaped like a fish. She's part of a group preparing for a small festival, and they tie ribbons, light wicks that whisper about Jupiter's favor. One girl balances on a low wall, arms spread like wings. Her laugh slices the quiet, but no one shushes her. Fringe Tidbit. Romans believed certain crossroads were haunted by mischievous spirits called lemures. To keep them at bay, people left beans. Yes, beans. You wonder whether the turtles eat them, too. Back near the bath complex, steam rolls lazily into the night air, even unfinished. The baths radiate calm. A worker scrubs the marble benches with a rag, humming tunelessly. Another sorts oils and towels with near spiritual devotion. You dip your fingers into a shallow pool. It's perfectly warm. You consider moving in. Someone passes you holding a statue's arm. Just the arm. "It's late," he mumbles. "I'll find the rest tomorrow." You nod in solemn agreement. Some puzzles aren't meant to be solved in one night. You pass beneath an archway, still etched with chalk marks. A man with a crooked smile counts each step he takes with a soft murmur. 17, 18, uns. Asimdam. 19. You ask if he's measuring something. "I'm trying to reach 100 without thinking about centurions." You both fail. Laughter echoes. Finally, you return to a quiet spot, a ledge overlooking the construction site where everything began. And the cranes have stilled, the carts parked, the sawdust settled like snow. A few figures still move in the distance, silhouettes against lantern light, but mostly, the city sleeps. You close your eyes. The scent of stone dust, oil lamps, and warm bread clings to the air. Even in this moment of rest, the city pulses, a giant lung drawing in the past, holding the present and breathing out the future. You awake, or rather, drift further into this waking dream, to the sounds of measured tapping and whispered conversation. The city is stirring again, not with the urgency of daybreak, but the slow, deliberate rhythm of continuity. It's the middle of the night, but for some Romans, work never truly stops. Down in the marble yard, you see figures silhouetted by oil lamps, gently polishing pre-carved statues with cloth soaked in goat milk and ash. A centaur, half revealed in the glow, seems to wink at you. Maybe it's the light, or maybe he really is judging your toga. Mainstream historical fact. Roman sculptors often worked at night during certain months to avoid the scorching sun, softening the marble wax templates. Night work was cooler and quieter, letting them focus on detail without distraction. You step carefully over a scattering of marble shards, sharp as broken promises, and make your way to a colonnade in progress. Here, columns rise like sleeping giants, each base wrapped in linen to prevent dust scratches. A pair of workers play a slow dice game beside one, whispering bets as they wait for mortar to dry. A rat scurries past with a piece of dried fig, clearly winning his own game. Fringe Tidbit. There are preserved Roman contracts showing that rats were sometimes blamed for architectural mishaps. One builder even paid for fig lures to keep them away from plasterwork. Historians still argue whether this was a common practice or just one man's rat paranoia. Further on, you reach the edge of a freshly leveled construction plot. A plumb line dangles lazily from a scaffold, swaying ever so slightly in the midnight breeze. The engineer on duty snores gently against a crate of bricks, stylus still in hand. On the tablet beside him, a doodle of a lion in a toga, bizarrely well drawn. In the distance, you hear the click of sandals on stone and turn to see a woman hauling 2 water jugs with the practiced grace of someone who's done this 1,000 times. Her child walks beside her, pointing out constellations. "That one looks like a sleeping horse," the boy says. You squint. It kind of does. You follow them until they turn toward a cluster of small tenement blocks, insulae, homes of the everyday citizens. One door is propped open with a stone. Inside, a man sings a lullaby in Latin, gently off-key. A cat watches from a windowsill, tail twitching like a conductor's baton. Inside another apartment, a woman mends a tunic by lamplight. Her thread glows like gold. She pricks her finger, mutters a mild curse, then laughs to herself. You wonder if the tunic's for her husband. Or maybe her wife. Rome has layers, and the wind picks up slightly, carrying scents of olive oil, damp linen, and the faintest tang of brass. You pass a street vendor, yes, still open, roasting chickpeas in a small clay dish. He gives you one for free. It's warm, salty, and perfect. Mainstream historical fact. Roman night markets, though less common, did exist, especially during festivals. Some stalls sold warm food for late shift workers or insomniacs wandering like yourself. At a quiet crossroad, a statue of Mercury peers down, his stone eyes catching the flicker of a torch. Someone's left him an offering, 3 grapes and a shiny shell. You consider adding your chickpea. He'd probably understand. Historians still argue whether street-level statues were focal points of spiritual protection or just fancy road markers. Either way, you feel watched, but in a protective way, like the city itself is gently shepherding you forward. Ahead, a lone flute drifts through the alley. You follow the melody to a rooftop, where a girl plays to an audience of 1, a sleeping dog. The music, full of rise and fall, somehow captures everything: hope, boredom, dust, and dreams. You sit and listen. The dog snores. Later, you descend to find a young builder sketching plans into the dirt with a stick. "One day," he whispers, "I'll design a temple, a big one, for peace." Then he nods to himself, then brushes away the drawing as if it were a secret too large for the world. You don't speak, you just smile. The city doesn't need loud dreams. It builds slowly, brick by brick, even in silence. As you turn the corner, you come face to face with a doorway, newly installed, still wrapped in straw matting for protection. A carved lintel above reads "Salve." a greeting for those who enter. You reach out and touch the warm wood, as if sealing your place in this unfinished symphony of stone and soul. You wander into the city's forum just as the sky begins its slow, violet bloom. There's no sunrise yet, just the deep hush before it, like the moment between breaths. Torches still flicker in their brackets, casting dancing shadows on marble walls. And the stone under your feet is cool, still holding on to the night. It's here, in this heart of the city, that you find the planners, those elusive, quiet minds who dream of Rome not just as stone and mortar, but as philosophy given form. You sit on the steps of a basilica where two men huddle over scrolls, muttering in tones soft enough to lull even the most stubborn insomniac. Mainstream historical fact: Roman city planning followed a rigid layout based on Greek models, especially the grid-like Cardo, north-south road, and Decumanus, east-west road. These planners didn't just build cities, they orchestrated a worldview. One man unrolls a scroll with a theatrical flair, clearly the dramatic type, and traces his finger along a proposed aqueduct route. The other yawns deeply and spills ink across a diagram. Neither seems alarmed. You realize it's not a mistake, it's a method. Sometimes water must find its own course. You glance up and see pigeons strutting across the roofline like tiny Roman senators, bobbing heads and cooing disapprovals. One perches directly above the model city, perhaps critiquing the lack of bird baths. In a far corner, a boy sweeps the floor with a broom longer than he is tall. He hums a tune older than memory, maybe a lullaby from his grandmother, or a tavern jig disguised as work music. Either way, it's calming. You find yourself swaying slightly. Quirky tidbit: Roman planners often used wax or sand tables to model entire city districts. A sudden sneeze could erase a whole neighborhood. Historians still argue whether one famed ghost city on record, Neapolis minus, was ever more than a sandy mistake. As you move deeper into the forum, you pass a cluster of artisans preparing tiles for a mosaic. The pieces are so small, you wonder how they don't just vanish into the wind. One artist holds up a piece of sapphire glass and smiles at you, then carefully places it into the shape of an iris. The mosaic forms a scene of a quiet road winding toward a villa, an escape, a dream. You wonder if the artist longs to live in that dream more than this world of dust and splinters. Past the mosaic, a teacher holds an open lesson for sleepy apprentices seated on crates. He recites Virgil in a low murmur, the kind of voice you'd follow anywhere, even into dreams. His students mostly yawn, one of them doodling a crude face in his wax tablet. It looks suspiciously like the teacher, but you pretend not to notice the resemblance. Down an alley, a scribe sits cross-legged, copying property records by lamplight. You catch a glimpse of what he's written: names, measurements, taxes. Mundane, yes, but written in the same letters as poems and laws. There's something reverent in that. Mainstream historical fact: scribes were often slaves or freedmen. Some highly educated, Their accuracy was so valued that mistakes in city planning documents could lead to public floggings, or worse, lengthy legal debates. Pick your punishment. A nearby vendor stretches out a bolt of dyed linen to air it in the breeze. The colors catch the faint light: ochre, indigo, and a blue so pale it seems to shimmer with memory. She runs her fingers across the weave and whispers something to herself. A prayer? A curse? A thread count? At the forum's edge, you find a shallow fountain. A small girl drops a pebble in and giggles at the ripples. Her father tries to pull her away gently, but she resists with the determined gravity of a moon. Eventually, he relents and sits beside her, tossing in his own pebble. The two laugh, and the fountain gurgles approval. Historians still argue whether Roman public fountains were primarily functional or symbolic of community wealth. Some believe they were designed as social anchors, places to gather, to dream, to toss a pebble and whisper a hope. As you rise, stretching limbs you didn't realize had grown stiff, the light finally shifts. The torches flicker less brightly, and the first pale warmth of morning brushes the building's upper stones. One of the planners stands beside you now, watching the sky. "You see that?" he says softly. That's when the stones wake up. You nod. You feel it too. The city isn't just being built. It's building itself into your memory. Brick by careful brick, as you follow the slow stirrings of the city toward the outskirts, where the builders begin their long day with the groan of wooden carts and the clink of iron tools. The sun hasn't yet made its full appearance, but a blush of warmth touches the horizon, like someone slowly stoking the coals of a massive sky oven. You breathe in the scent of damp stone, morning bread, and something unmistakably donkey. Past rows of unfinished columns and stacks of marble blocks, you spot the mason's yard. It's not glamorous, just a scattering of makeshift shelters, wooden scaffolding, and dust. Lots of dust. But this is where cities grow, not in speeches or scrolls, but in sweat and mortar. Mainstream historical fact: Roman concrete, known as opus caementitium, was an innovation that allowed massive structures like the Pantheon and aqueducts to stand for millennia. It's a mix of lime, volcanic ash, and rubble, simple but enduring. The workers move like a slow symphony. One hauls a basket of bricks on his back. Another mixes mortar with a giant wooden paddle. A boy sings a repetitive chant to keep time, his voice cracked and cheerful. Nearby, a foreman sips hot posca, a vinegary soldier's drink, and bellows instructions with all the urgency of a half-awake goose. Your attention drifts to a row of chisels laid out like sacred relics. Each bears a tiny notch or personal engraving. One has a fish, another a crescent moon, and a third simply says, Lucia. Now you wonder who she is: wife, daughter, or maybe the best cook in the neighborhood? A worker hums as he smooths the side of a column. It's mesmerizing. His hands are worn, and his tunic is stained with dust, but the column is flawless, like he's slowly unveiling a bone from the earth. Quirky tidbit. Some Roman construction sites employed trained pigeons to carry messages between supply points, though some were allegedly promoted to soup when messages arrived late. A dog dozes beneath a nearby cart, one ear twitching at your footsteps. The cart is stacked with fired clay bricks, each stamped with a mark denoting the workshop of origin, sort of like a Roman QR code, but less digital and more, "Please don't drop me." Historians still argue whether Roman building projects used mostly skilled labor or relied heavily on slave workers. Evidence from different cities suggests a mix, with regional pride often elevating certain local artisans to near celebrity status. You watch as a woman with arms of carved oak lifts a stone block and places it perfectly into position. She wipes her brow with her sleeve and mutters something that sounds suspiciously like a poem. You're not sure if she's cursing or composing. In one corner, a painter dabs red pigment onto a freshly carved sign, marking the boundaries of a future bathhouse. He's in no rush. He dips, dabs, studies, and then sighs. Artists, it seems, don't change across the centuries. You step over a plank bridge laid across a muddy patch, and on the other side, a young man is etching a name into wet plaster. He glances up guiltily when you approach, then grins and keeps going. The name? Felix. Either his name or someone he wants to impress. A bird lands on a scaffold beam and begins to chirp, adding its commentary to the hammering and chanting. You imagine the builders consider it part of the crew. The sun now pushes above the city walls, igniting the tools, the stones, and the sweat-beaded faces in a glow that feels almost holy. For a moment, everything slows. The breeze carries mortar dust into swirls. A builder stretches and yawns, and the city pauses to listen to itself grow. Mainstream historical fact: Romans meticulously planned construction phases, often including on-site altars for offerings to deities like Terminus, god of boundaries, or Vulcan, god of fire and the forge. Blessing the first cornerstone was as much spiritual as structural. A small group gathers around a newly dug trench, inspecting a strange stone uncovered from the earth. It's not part of the city plans. Someone suggests it's an omen. Another calls it a rock. A third swears it looks like his uncle. A spirited debate ensues. Quirky tidbit: superstition ran deep on Roman job sites. Dropping a trowel on your foot was unlucky. Dropping it on someone else's foot? A sign of betrayal or bad aim. As the sun climbs higher, the work resumes its rhythm. Stone meets stone, voice meets echo, and the city breathes through its scaffolding. You linger a moment longer, letting the cadence settle into your bones like a lullaby sung in dust and rhythm. You leave the site with a slight smile and an inexplicable desire to build something. Maybe not a city, but perhaps a slightly straighter bookshelf. You wander further into the pulse of the growing Roman city. where the hum of construction shifts into the delicate choreography of carpenters and roofers. There's a rhythm here too, less like thunder, more like a lullaby played on wooden flutes and creaking ladders. A light breeze tickles the back of your neck, carrying the faint scent of resin and fresh-cut pine. Overhead, slats of sunlight flicker through half-finished rooftops. Like hesitant candlelight, you pass a scaffold where a young apprentice, no older than 16, balances precariously on a beam, hammer in hand and tongue sticking out in concentration. His tunic flaps in the breeze like an unimpressed flag. Mainstream historical fact: Roman rooftops were traditionally made using tegulae and imbresses, overlapping clay tiles engineered to drain rainwater efficiently and withstand Mediterranean storms, when they remembered to install them correctly. As you gaze up, you see a senior roofer, a man with a back like a question mark and fingers like roots, nimbly arrange tiles in rhythmic rows. He mutters numbers to himself under his breath. Is he counting tiles or curses? You can't tell. Nearby, a woman in russet robes saws planks with effortless ease, her face calm, even bored. Sawdust swirls in lazy spirals around her feet. She pauses to inspect a wooden beam, then flicks a splinter off her arm with practiced indifference. Quirky tidbit: some Roman builders swore that leaving a single tile crooked was good luck, like inviting the gods to fix one last thing and then leave you alone. Others just blamed lazy apprentices on noon. You step into a semi-built home, nothing but columns, a few walls, and a skeleton of rafters. The floor is still packed earth, and a pile of reeds lies nearby, waiting to be transformed into sleeping mats. A pair of sandals sits in the corner, lonely and unsure how they ended up here. Inside, a pair of builders argue over the dimensions of a doorway. One insists the measurement was 6 peeds. The other swears it was 5 3/4. They settle it with a dramatic game of whose chalk line is straighter, ending in laughter and the sudden appearance of a third worker who quietly fixes it while they're distracted. Historians still argue whether Roman residential architecture was strictly class-divided or more fluid in design. Archaeological evidence reveals homes with a mix of upper and lower-class features, suggesting a surprising flexibility, or perhaps just budget overruns. You emerge onto the roof beams, drawn by the lull of a carpenter's lullaby. It's not for anyone in particular, just a tune to keep his hand steady as he fits a joist into place. His foot taps with each line, tile by tile, beam by beam. May the gods keep out the rain. Another man, lounging on a support column, fans himself with a bit of papyrus and jokes about retiring as soon as he finishes this one house. Judging by the look of the house, he's not retiring anytime soon. Below, a child, barefoot and covered in dust, pretends to direct traffic with a stick, yelling orders at oxen who ignore him entirely. You smile and move on. The world's spinning ever so slightly slower here. Mainstream historical fact: Roman homes often featured courtyards, atria, designed not only for ventilation and light, but also as social hubs. Construction of these spaces required precision and an understanding of airflow long before the term open concept became trendy. One builder lifts a stone basin into place for what will become a fountain. He adjusts it once, twice, then decides it's perfectly imperfect. You can tell by the exaggerated nod he gives himself. Another worker nods back in solemn agreement. Sacred ritual or synchronized sarcasm? Hard to say. In the corner of another half-finished house, someone has etched a smiling face into the wet plaster. 2 dots and a lopsided line. A little reminder that even in empire building, doodles are eternal. Quirky tidbit. Graffiti found in ancient Roman homes often includes drawings of animals, jokes about neighbors, and one infamous scrawl that reads, "I was here before the paint dried. Sorry, Marcus." You pause as a gust of wind scatters sawdust like golden snow. The sun dips lower now, casting long shadows through the ribcage of rooftops, still becoming whole. You hear laughter, soft and distant. It belongs to the people who one day live in these homes. Echoes from the future. As you descend from the scaffold, your foot brushes against a tiny clay token, an offering to Vesta, goddess of the hearth. Someone placed it there with hope, or maybe just habit. You move on, steps slow and shoulders relaxed. The work is far from done, but so much has been shaped, molded, and carved already. Every beam and joint feels like the city itself is stretching its arms and whispering, "Almost home, huh?" Your path meanders into the bustling heart of what will become a Roman forum, though right now, it's more mud than marble. The Grand Civic Center to be is little more than a flattened expanse, bordered by piles of stone blocks, rust-colored scaffolding, and the occasional confused goat who wandered in from someone's breakfast. You tread lightly past a crew of surveyors, marking out the future foundation lines using taut strings and copper rods. One of them squints at a wax tablet and points east, while the others rearrange the rods with the seriousness of soldiers laying out a battlefield. Except here, the weapons are geometry and exasperation. Mainstream historical fact: Roman forums were the administrative, commercial, and social heart of the city, often featuring basilicas, temples, markets, and curia buildings all in a single architectural embrace. There's a painter nearby with ochre-stained hands, slapping a crude sketch of the forum's layout onto a wooden plank. He gestures dramatically to an imagined basilica, waving his arm so passionately that he nearly knocks over his ink pot. "Imagine it," he bellows to no one. "Columns that touch the clouds." He gets a polite nod from a mule. You sidestep a heap of marble intended for statues, currently covered in canvas to protect from dust, and possibly also from artistic doubt. Someone has scribbled, "Do not chisel," on one, though the word "not" looks like it was added later in a different hand. A boy scurries past carrying a basket of chisels nearly his size. "Don't drop any," a man calls. "Last time we had to fish one out of a senator's fountain." The boy doesn't respond, too focused on balancing the tools and his dignity at once. Quirky tidbit. Some Roman architects deliberately built slight optical illusions into their structures, angling columns and tiles to compensate for how the human eye perceives depth. The result? A forum that always looks perfectly straight, at least from the right angle. You drift past the foundation of what will be the Temple of Jupiter. Right now, it's little more than a ring of knee-high stones and an altar made from an upturned crate. A priest in white linen sprinkles wine and murmurs blessings that sound suspiciously like shopping lists. Still, the gesture is comforting. Sacredness, like cement, must begin somewhere. In the distance, a woman paces on a makeshift stage, practicing a speech for what she claims will be the opening of the city's first court of law. Her voice is firm, confident, and occasionally interrupted by the screech of a wheelbarrow or the honk of a disgruntled goose. She waves a scroll as if it's a sword, and even the workmen pause to listen, just for a moment. Historians still argue whether the Roman Forum was more a space of governance or of commerce. Was it a courtroom disguised as a market, or a market dressed like a palace? The truth, perhaps, lies in the in-between, at the forum's edge. Masons lay the first stones of what will be the marketplace stalls. The stones are irregular, some scorched, others reused from another city. One mason jokes that the stones are older than his father and twice as stubborn. A nearby food cart, already opportunistic, sells lentil cakes and hot honey water to the workers. The scent is warm and slightly burnt. A line forms, and you notice more chatter here than at any other station. Maybe this is already a forum, in its own chaotic way. A sculptor sits cross-legged beside a half-finished bust. The face is too angular, the eyes too close. He frowns, wipes sweat from his brow, and mutters, "Maybe it's supposed to look wise?" You can't tell if he's joking. Mainstream historical fact. Roman sculptors often stylized features to match virtues. Deep lines signified wisdom. Wide eyes denoted vision. Reality was flexible if it served the message. One of the builders accidentally drops a slab that echoes like thunder across the muddy square. Everyone freezes. Then someone yells. It sounded like applause. And the tension breaks in a wave of laughter. You pause beside a column base, running your fingers over its smooth curve. Just yesterday, it was a boulder. Just tomorrow, it will hold up history. Quirky tidbit. Ancient Roman masons sometimes left hidden etchings beneath column drums. Tiny personal signatures or prayers carved where no one could see. A quiet defiance against anonymity. The sun hangs heavy above, casting the skeletal forum in long diagonal shadows. Somewhere, a hammer taps like a heartbeat. You close your eyes for a moment, hearing it slow, slow, slow. This city isn't built by emperors. Not really. It's built by laughter, by dropped tools, by arguments over square footage, and by dreams sketched in the dust before they're carved in stone. You drift from the forum to be toward a quieter edge of the construction site, where the first aqueduct arch is being imagined into place. Right now, it's only a raised wooden scaffold and a stack of stones. But there's a certain magic in how confidently the workers carry themselves. As though the water already flows above their heads, you squint up at the open air where the arch will stand. There's nothing there yet, but still, you feel its weight, its promise, hovering like a ghost of the future. An architect in a red-dyed toga is pacing below, muttering measurements and waving his hands in wide arcs. He trips over a chicken. The chicken is fine. The architect less so. Mainstream historical fact. Roman aqueducts relied on precise gradients, dropping just inches per mile to maintain the flow of water using only gravity. A marvel of ancient engineering precision. A boy holds up a plumb line, its copper weight swaying slowly as he adjusts the tension. His father, beside him, nods with approval, then adjusts the boy's grip. "Feel the balance," he says, "like holding your breath before a secret." The masons are testing keystones, those triangular pieces that will lock the arch in place. They pass one around, each tapping it with a small wooden mallet like monks testing a melon. One mutters, "This one's got a good ring." Another shrugs. "You said that about the last 5. Quirky tidbit. Romans sometimes mark their favorite stones with tiny symbols. Stars, crescents, fish, scratched with iron nails. No one's sure if it was superstition, quality control, or both. You step closer to a chalk drawing on the ground. It shows the whole aqueduct route, from the distant hills, through valleys, and eventually into the city. It's covered in boot prints and smudges, but still clear enough to feel like a map of veins leading to the heart. A mule brays in protest nearby, refusing to haul another cart of stones up the slope. Its handler sighs, pats its flank, and feeds it half a fig. The mule seems deeply unimpressed, but proceeds nonetheless, albeit with theatrical reluctance. Historians still argue whether Roman aqueducts were more a political tool or a public service. Were they monuments to imperial power or quiet gifts of life-giving water? Perhaps. Like most things Roman, they were a bit of both. Farther uphill, a pair of workers joke about swimming in the channel once it's finished. "I'll bring olives," one says. "I'll bring wine," says the other. "We'll drown in style." A supervisor glares at them, but his smirk betrays amusement. You pause beside a pile of mortar and crushed limestone. The scent is earthy, damp, like freshly tilled soil. A boy is stirring it with a long stick, pretending it's a soup. "What's today's flavor?" you ask. "Victory," he says, solemnly. A carpenter nearby is carving the wooden centering, the temporary support frame that will hold the arch in place during construction. His hands move quickly, confidently, but not without affection. You can tell he's proud. This structure won't bear his name, but it will bear his weight. Mainstream historical fact. The centering had to be perfect in Roman arches. A single slip in symmetry could cause the entire structure to collapse before the keystone was inserted. You watch as they begin to hoist the first blocks into place. Ropes groan, pulleys creak, and the stones rise with glacial grace. A hush falls over the workers, as if everyone is holding the same breath. A misstep here could turn months of work into rubble. The first stone lands with a thud and a cloud of dust. A cheer goes up, not raucous, just a soft ripple of satisfaction, like the whisper of a tide pulling in. Quirky tidbit. In some ceremonies, the placement of the first aqueduct stone was accompanied by music, flutes and lyres, to charm the stone into settling well. You turn your gaze toward the horizon, where more arches are planned. Someone has stuck little wooden flags along the future path, each fluttering gently in the breeze. They look like a parade frozen in time. In the distance, a woman with a basket of herbs watches silently. She offers a few sprigs of mint and basil to the workers. "For strong lungs," she says. No one questions her. In Rome, even superstition earns its place. Historians still debate whether aqueducts changed daily Roman life as much as we imagine. Did common citizens notice the difference between a cistern filled by rain and one by mountain stream? Or was it simply enough to know the water never stopped? One last glance upward. The arch remains unfinished, a stone skeleton against the clouds. But already, in your mind, you can see it whole. Not because you have to, but because they will. And as you step away, that imagined stream of water murmurs behind your thoughts, cool, patient, and impossibly clear. You wander farther into the skeletal beginnings of the Roman city, toward a patch of earth ringed by strings and pegs. There's little to see at first, just outlines and dust. But as you settle into the rhythm of the day, the city begins to draw itself on the ground. It starts with roads, long straight ones, of course, like someone ruled a massive line across the world and then dared everyone to build around it. You kneel beside a line of compacted gravel, watching workers pound the roadbed flat with heavy tamps. Thud, thud, thud. The beat is slow and hypnotic, like a heartbeat you didn't know you shared with the earth. The stones they lay are angular and unforgiving, but arranged so neatly they almost look tender. Mainstream historical fact. Roman roads were built in layers, large stones at the base, crushed gravel in the middle, and tightly fitted paving stones on top, sloped for water drainage. They were not just functional, but deeply methodical. Nearby, a surveyor walks backward with a waxed cord line stretched between stakes. He mutters to himself, then waves for someone to adjust an angle by a hair's width. "One crooked street," he says, "and you'll be haunted by it forever." He's only half joking. A group of children plays at the edge of the site, using discarded pebbles to mark out imaginary homes. One calls herself a senator and insists the others deliver grapes to her mud villa. She makes an excellent tyrant. Quirky tidbit. Some Roman children were trained in miniature building techniques, learning to lay tiles or cut stone using play sets of actual tools scaled down to child size. Mini masons, if you will. A cart full of bricks rumbles past. The mule pulling it has one eye and no patience. Its handler offers a tuneless whistle, which is ignored. then follows up with a half-sung lullaby, which is somehow worse. The mule eventually moves, likely out of spite. Historians still argue whether the famed Roman grid system was always adhered to. In theory, every city began with a cardo, north-south, and decumanus, east-west, street. In practice, well, have you seen Pompeii? You pass a small crowd gathered around a pile of broken tiles. A debate is underway. Are these temple-worthy or only good for taverns? One man insists a misfired kiln is a sign from the gods. Another replies, well, the gods must be bored. A pair of stonecutters chisels matching lintels for doorways, their arms moving in mirrored rhythm. One hums, the other curses in soft tones that somehow still feel polite. They argue whether square corners or rounded arches are more fashionable this year. Fashionable because doorways apparently follow trends now. Mainstream historical fact. Wealthier Roman homes often featured arched doorways with carved inscriptions or painted plaster frescoes around them. Status symbols embedded in stone. A light wind rises, blowing chalk dust into the air like smoke. A group of elders walk slowly across the site, nodding approvingly. One carries a scroll and occasionally jots down notes, though no one's entirely sure if he's a government official or just enthusiastic. You pause near a gathering of laborers resting on stacked timber. One roasts a fig over a small brazier. Another is gently cleaning a stone with a damp cloth. They're tired, but there's pride in their quiet, and the city they're building might outlive them all. But they're here now, shaping it one stone at a time. Quirky tidbit. Some Roman workers left small carvings of animals or initials in bricks or mortar joints. Tiny signatures hidden in plain sight. A boy offers you a sip of water from a leather flask. It tastes of earth and copper, but it's cold and kind. And you nod your thanks. He beams like he's just handed you treasure. And in a way, he has. Historians still debate whether Roman urban planning was imposed top-down by elites or gradually shaped by the needs of the people. Was it a blueprint or a living organism? The answer, much like the city, is complicated. You stroll along what will soon be the central market square. Right now, it's just a rectangle of dirt framed by wooden markers. But already vendors are placing stones to test how carts will roll and where shade might fall. Two women measure the distance between stall posts using outstretched arms. 1 arm length of fish, 2 of cheese, and 3 for gossip. One jokes. The other adds, "And half an arm for my cousin's lies." You sit on a low wall as twilight sneaks in, turning everything the color of old coins. The workers begin packing up, their laughter rising over the clink of tools and creak of wooden wheels. A city isn't built in a day, but this one has earned its rest. You look back at the ground, now traced with lines, ridges, and scattered stones. To anyone else, it might seem like chaos, but to you, it's starting to look like home. You rise with the sun the next day, its pale gold glow spilling over the half-built city like warm honey. There's a soft mist on the horizon, curling around the scaffolding like it's shy to reveal what's been done overnight. You walk through it barefoot, the dew soaking into your soles and the scent of earth and lime thick in the air. There's a strange comfort in this. A new day, same bricks. Your first stop is the water channel. It's not much to look at yet. Just a dusty trench with a few carved stones. But you hear murmurs that it will be the lifeline of the entire city. A man with thick forearms and an even thicker accent explains how the aqueduct will eventually bring water from the hills, passing over arches that will stretch like giant stone caterpillars across the fields. Mainstream historical fact: Roman aqueducts relied on gravity, with an average gradient of just 1 in 4,800. That's precision engineering, using tools no more sophisticated than a plumb line and a really grumpy goat for slope testing. Quirky tidbit: some aqueducts even carried wine or olive oil during festivals. Not the most efficient plumbing, but certainly the most festive. You trail behind a crew dragging a wooden crane base toward the forum. It's not elegant, but it works. One man, clearly the self-appointed supervisor, walks backward yelling measurements with increasing urgency. 3 cubits more. No, less. Wait. Does anyone here know what a cubit is anymore? They're installing columns today. Slender, solemn things with fluted grooves and grand aspirations. Each is pulled upright with pulleys and rope, groaning like an old man standing after a long nap. You hold your breath as one sways dangerously before settling with a solid thunk. Applause breaks out, and someone offers a prayer to the god of not dropping things. Historians still argue whether column styles, Doric, Ionic, Corinthian, were chosen for function, symbolism, or simply whatever looked best in shadow at sunset. Aesthetics mattered. These weren't just buildings, they were statements. And you wander into a half-framed atrium, its beams casting striped shadows across a mosaic in progress. 2 artisans crouch on woven mats, placing tiny tesserae into a sea of lime paste. One is humming a lullaby, the other snorts and declares, "Fish again? Always fish." I want to do a bear next. Apparently, domestic floor decoration is an underrated creative battlefield. Mainstream historical fact: wealthy Roman homes often featured mosaics of animals, mythological scenes, or geometric patterns, many preserved under volcanic ash or collapsed roofs. A child nearby is sketching a lion with charcoal on a scrap of plaster. You ask what it's for, and she shrugs. Maybe the bathhouse, maybe a dream. She's 7. You sincerely hope she's in charge of the bathhouse by age 10. As you move past stacks of terracotta tiles, you see 2 men practicing inscriptions in wax tablets. They test different slogans for the front of a granary: wheat for the many, prosperity in grain, and, your favorite, no mice allowed, we mean it. Artistic expression meets pest control. Quirky tidbit: Roman builders sometimes embedded good luck charms, coins, nails, even tiny carved phalluses into foundations to ward off misfortune and bad spirits. A sudden commotion distracts you. A runaway goat barrels through a cart of clay pots, bleeding like it's fleeing a tax audit. A boy chases after it, holding up a sandal like a weapon. The goat wins this round. You lean against a wall that wasn't here yesterday. It's a simple thing, sun-baked bricks stacked in careful rows, but it casts a long, square shadow now. Progress, one rectangle at a time. A philosopher in faded robes stands near a bench, lecturing to no one in particular about the geometry of virtue. You nod solemnly and sit beside him. He says, "Every city needs walls, and not all of them are made of stone." Deep, also slightly confusing. Historians still debate whether the layout of Roman cities was a tool of control or a path to harmony. Did roads guide lives or confine them? Were plazas open spaces or curated distractions? You end your morning stroll by a fig tree planted just outside the city bounds. A woman tends it with quiet focus, humming a tune older than the Republic. You ask if she'll move into the city when it's done. She smiles and says, "Why would I do that? I already live in the shade of something we built." The city's rising, not just in stone, but in meaning. Every road laid is a story waiting to be walked. Every arch a doorway into someone's future. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, you're becoming part of it, too. It's late afternoon now, and the city feels like it's breathing. You hear the cadence of mallets on chisels, the rustle of cloth as market awnings are tied, and the occasional off-key singing of a bricklayer who insists he's a bard in disguise. There's something hypnotic about it all, soothing. Like waves lapping stone, you pass a line of workers carving stones into uniform blocks. They work slowly, methodically, pausing only to sip water or comment on the artistic merits of rectangularity. One man holds up a nearly finished slab and says, "It's beautiful, like a very boring painting." You agree, it is his. Mainstream historical fact. Roman masons were experts in opus caementitium, a type of concrete made from volcanic ash, lime, and seawater, far more durable than modern mixes and still standing in some harbors today. Quirky tidbit. Some Roman concrete formulations actually grew stronger with age due to a rare chemical reaction involving seawater and volcanic minerals. Your modern driveway? Jealous. You meander toward the future marketplace, its wide foundation already etched into the earth like a giant board game. A surveyor walks in spirals, muttering numbers and waving a knotted cord while trying not to trip over a chicken. Apparently, poultry is not part of the measuring system. But nobody tells the chicken that. A team of women is weaving baskets beside a pile of amphorae, their hands a blur of reeds and rhythm. One pauses to adjust her scarf and tells you they're making containers for figs, olives, and other important things, like secrets. You nod, pretending to understand the metaphor. She's probably just tired. You spot a group of children painting miniature cityscapes on scraps of discarded tile. Their imagined buildings tower like castles, with rainbow roofs and floating arches. One child proudly shows you his city for dreams. Another hands you a tile that just has a smiling stick figure goat. Art is subjective. Historians still argue whether Roman cities were designed more for military logistics or civic pride. Was the grid layout a method of control, or a symbol of order and ambition? Near a half-built theater, a pair of architects argue over the best placement for an echo wall. One insists on acoustics. The other wants more space for statues of victorious poets. They eventually compromise by going to lunch and hoping someone else makes the decision. Ancient delegation at its finest. As the sun begins to dip, you stroll toward the communal bathhouse in progress. It's just a hollow frame of stone and scaffolding now. But a man with singed eyebrows assures you the hypocauste system will be glorious. He's laying fire channels beneath the floor while humming a tune that sounds suspiciously like a lullaby. Mainstream historical fact. Roman bathhouses were marvels of engineering, featuring heated floors, hot and cold pools, and even early steam rooms. They were social hubs, equal parts hygiene, gossip, and philosophical banter. Quirky tidbit. Some bathhouse attendants used strigils, curved metal tools, to scrape sweat and dirt off bathers' skin. It sounds unpleasant, but people paid extra for it. Talk about exfoliation with extreme prejudice. You sit on a stone bench nearby and watch the changing sky. Swirls of coral and peach blend into the horizon, like the gods are painting just for you. A baker passes by with a basket of warm loaves, the smell making your stomach rumble like a war drum. He offers you one wordlessly. You accept. Sleepy stories require sustenance. A flute player leans against an unfinished column, playing a song so delicate you're not sure if it's real or imagined. The notes drift upward, wrapping around beams and scaffolds, lingering like incense. A dog howls along, slightly off pitch but enthusiastic. It's a duet for the ages. Historians still debate whether music in Roman construction zones was meant to boost morale or simply keep tempo. Regardless, it's hard to argue with a worker whistling in 6/8 time while balancing a roof tile on his head. You end the day under a half-built arch, watching silhouettes move like shadow puppets against the setting sun. One figure waves. You wave back. Even though you can't see who it is, it doesn't matter. Here, in the middle of something not yet finished, you feel complete. The city grows around you, brick by brick, breath by breath. And though nothing is quite done, walls missing, paint waiting, windows still dreaming, you already belong. You wake not from sleep, but from a momentary trance as twilight slips into the bones of the half-finished city. Everything is soft now. The edges of marble columns blur in the low light, and the lanterns begin to flicker on, their glow warm and honeyed. You don't remember who lit them, but they're here, glowing like dreams, just about to take shape. Your feet bring you to a quiet street where rows of insulae, the Roman apartment buildings, are taking form. Scaffolds still cling to their sides like sleepy spiders, and men on ladders mutter half-heartedly about symmetry and stairwells. You pass under wooden beams and duck as someone spills a ladle of plaster from above. "Oops," comes the apology. It smells faintly of limestone and, somehow, goat. Mainstream historical fact. Roman insulae could rise up to 6 stories tall in crowded cities like Rome and Ostia. The wealthy often lived on the lower floors, with more modest dwellers huddled under the eaves in the higher, wobblier levels. Quirky tidbit. Some insulae had rooftop gardens or communal pigeon coops. Yes, pigeons. Imagine stepping outside for a breath of fresh air, and a surprise flutter of bird. A dog trots past with a scroll in its mouth, ignoring your presence like you're merely a pedestrian in its epic. You follow, curious, until you reach a small shrine tucked between 2 buildings. It's new, the plaster still fresh, but already someone has placed garlands and a tiny statue of a household god. One eyebrow lifted in eternal suspicion. A priest in training kneels nearby, whispering an evening chant to no one in particular. You sit across from him quietly. His voice lilts like wind chimes. And though you don't understand every word, you feel it. The sacred in the ordinary, the divinity in routine. Historians still argue whether household worship was deeply personal or simply habitual. Were Romans seeking cosmic favor, or just checking a box on the divine to-do list? You pass a half-carved wall relief, a woman grinding grain, a child chasing a goose, a man sneezing with theatrical flair. Everyday scenes immortalized in stone. You smile. Even now, we crave stories that say, yes, this happened. This mattered. Nearby, a group of painters debates over pigment recipes while grinding ochre on slate. One claims blue is a rare luxury, the color of the gods. Another insists it makes walls look cold. They resolve their argument by painting half a pillar in each style. You wonder who will win, the divine or the decorators. You duck into an archway and find yourself in a courtyard ringed with columns. There's a cistern in the center, and around it, a few tired workers sip from flasks, tossing pebbles into the water one by one, timing the ripples with deep, deliberate breaths, a meditative rhythm. One turns to you and says, "Best way to build a city is slowly enough to love it." Mainstream historical fact. Roman courtyards, called atria, were often designed with open skylights and rain-catching basins, serving as both practical water sources and social gathering points. Quirky tidbit. Some atria included tiny indoor gardens with sacred laurel or fig trees. Others had decorative fountains shaped like frogs, nymphs, or extremely judgmental lions. The stars begin to twinkle faintly above the rooftops. Someone strikes a bronze bell, and its low hum echoes through the empty alleys like a lullaby in metal. You feel it resonate in your chest, steady, grounding, eternal. Historians still debate whether such bells were used for timekeeping or ceremonial rhythms. Some suggest they mark nothing more than the end of a workday. But isn't that sacred enough? You find a bench not far from a communal kitchen. It's quiet now, save for the clink of a spoon on clay and the faint hiss of simmering lentils. A woman hums a lullaby while stirring, and a cat coils at her feet like a spiral of shadow. You close your eyes, the warmth of fire and food washing over you like an unseen tide. Brick by brick, moment by moment, this city is becoming real, not because it's finished, but because it's shared. Because even in its incompleteness, it holds a heartbeat. The warmth of the communal kitchen fades behind you, but the scent of cumin and rosemary still lingers in your nostrils like the ghost of a meal you never ate. You move again through the city's underbelly, not the seedy part, but the quietly pulsing infrastructure that keeps everything running. Stone aqueducts carry water overhead in graceful arches, defying gravity and expectation alike. You follow the course of one such aqueduct, marveling at how the water flows as if guided by invisible fingers. Beneath it, small children play, their laughter echoing in the stone corridor like mischievous sprites. One of them holds a handmade toy, a wooden cart with a clay horse, rolling it along the worn paving stones as if imitating the builders who passed this way before. Mainstream historical fact: the Romans built over 400 kilometers of aqueducts to supply water to cities, with some systems flowing for over 50 miles before reaching a fountain or cistern. Quirky tidbit: Roman engineers used waterproof cement made of volcanic ash and lime, durable enough that parts of these aqueducts still stand today. No word on whether they waterproofed their socks. A group of engineers huddles nearby, pointing at an uneven patch in the stone, debating whether it's a flaw or a character feature. One shrugs and scrawls a chalk drawing of a fish to mark it. You can't help but laugh. You'd label your mistakes too if they looked that poetic. You veer off into a covered walkway where craftsmen work by lamplight. A potter spins a wheel slowly, his hands hypnotic, like he's kneading time itself. Vases grow from the clay like stories rising from silence. He glances at you, nods, and returns to shaping an amphora with a gentle hum. The melody is ancient and strangely modern, a tune that somehow suggests both a lullaby and a tax report. Historians still argue whether most Roman artisans worked independently or as part of large, organized guilds. But tonight, it feels like each one is an island of intention in a sea of dusk. You enter a domed chamber where fresco artists lie sprawled on scaffolding, painting mythological scenes above their heads. One depicts Venus combing her hair with a coral comb, while a sea dragon delivers her mail. Artistic license. Clearly, the colors glow even in the lamplight. Burnt sienna, lapis lazuli, bone white. Mainstream historical fact: frescoes were painted directly onto wet plaster, locking the pigments into the wall as it dried. This method, known as buon fresco, was both demanding and durable. Quirky tidbit: some frescoes included graffiti layered over them, ranging from poetry to angry notes like, "Marcus owes me 5 denarii and a goat." A young apprentice reaches into a jar of green paint, only to sneeze and accidentally swipe it across Jupiter's eyebrow, and the whole crew pauses. Someone mutters, "He looks contemplative now." Problem solved. Outside, you find a new road taking shape. Workers lay paving stones with the patience of monks, each rock carefully chosen for shape, heft, and attitude. The foreman calls them calm stones when they fit without wobbling, and grumpy stones when they don't. You crouch down and try fitting one yourself. It wobbles. Definitely grumpy. Historians still debate whether the famous durability of Roman roads came more from the layered construction or the regular maintenance schedules. Some believe it was just relentless Roman stubbornness, and honestly, that checks out. Night deepens, and the stars have scattered fully across the sky now. Lanterns hang like moons from door frames, flickering with the same unpredictable rhythm as dreams. You walk down a narrow alley and pause as a cat dashes past, chased by a small boy who insists the cat stole his sandals. The cat, being a cat, offers no defense. Nah. As you emerge into a plaza, you find a circle of elderly citizens playing a slow game with pebbles and carved sticks. One tells a joke about Julius Caesar and a goat. You don't understand the punchline, but everyone laughs, so you do too. Laughter, after all, is one of the few building materials that costs nothing and lasts forever. Mainstream historical fact: Roman plazas, or fora, served as public meeting spaces, marketplaces, and political centers. They were often paved with marble and surrounded by colonnades. Quirky tidbit: some forums had public urinals and street performers sharing the same square footage, history's earliest version of multitasking. You sit quietly by a column, watching the night bloom like ink across a page. The city is still being built, but in some ways, it's already complete. Not because it's finished, but because it's lived in. Every crooked stone, every mispainted god, every pebble game played at dusk, it all belongs. You lean back and close your eyes for a moment. Somewhere, a chisel taps stone. Somewhere, a pot simmers. Somewhere, a cat knocks over a sacred scroll and no one cares. And somewhere, deep in the blueprint of dreams, this city keeps growing. You rise with a stretch as the night deepens, and the city sighs with its own kind of exhaustion. The last warmth of day has evaporated, replaced by the cool breath of midnight curling through alleyways and temple steps. You find yourself near a small bridge arched gently over a narrow canal, the water below reflecting torches like sleepy stars. Across the bridge, a pair of stonemasons sits beside a crate of leftover marble chunks. They aren't working anymore, just talking. One of them carves a fish into a piece of stone with a pocket chisel, not for pay, but for pleasure. The other shares bread wrapped in linen. Neither rushes. You stand nearby, and they nod as if expecting you. Mainstream historical fact: Roman bridges often used concrete and stone arches to span wide rivers and canals. many of which remain structurally sound after millennia. Quirky tidbit: Roman laborers believed certain fish in river crossings brought good luck, and some even snuck carved fish motifs into bridge foundations for protection. You continue along the canal, where the ripples carry the city's stories in hushes. There's a perfumed stillness to the air now. Lanterns float by on tiny wooden trays, offerings, perhaps, or just dreams set adrift. You watch one bob gently, bearing a single fig and a violet petal. It's oddly moving. Down the road, you spot the edge of a newly forming neighborhood. Unlike the clean grid lines of the city's core, this place feels a bit experimental. Narrow streets twist unexpectedly. Staircases lead to balconies with no doors. And one house has what appears to be a statue of a chicken wearing laurels. Historians still argue whether Roman residential planning encouraged eccentricity or merely tolerated it. Judging by this street, the answer is both. A carpenter works late, shaping a lattice for a rooftop garden. He hums an off-key tune as he sands the wood. The scent is fresh and piney, reminding you of long-forgotten hikes through hills you never climbed. You peer up to see vines already curling through other rooftop trellises, green fingers reaching towards moonlight. Mainstream historical fact: some Roman homes, especially in wealthier districts, featured rooftop gardens or patios for cooling air and private leisure. Quirky tidbit: Roman poets sometimes composed verses specifically to be read in these rooftop gardens, where figs grew, cats prowled, and relatives couldn't overhear. You stop at a fountain shaped like a lion's head. The water flows in a gentle arc, and someone's placed a cluster of grapes on its edge. You take one. No one complains. The juice is sweet and sleepy on your tongue. In a nearby courtyard, musicians gather with a collection of mismatched instruments, reed pipes, frame drums, a lyre missing a string. They aren't practicing. They aren't performing. They're just drifting. One of them taps a slow rhythm on a bowl. Another plucks a note and lets it fade into the dark. They glance at you, but don't stop. Historians still debate whether music played a significant role in everyday Roman neighborhoods, or was reserved mostly for rituals and banquets. In moments like this, it's hard to imagine silence. A woman walks by, balancing a basket of herbs on her hip. She hums in harmony with the lyre player and gives you a little wink, as if to say, this is the best concert in town. And it's free. You settle onto a low bench beneath a fig tree. Overhead, bats flit silently like living punctuation marks. The fruit above you dangles in sleepy clusters, some already pecked open by daring birds. Just across the square, you see children asleep on woven mats beside their parents. Someone tells a bedtime story about a turtle who tried to outrun a comet. You catch only fragments, but it doesn't matter. It's the tone that wraps you in calm, like warm linen sheets after a bath. Mainstream historical fact: Roman families often slept communally in shared quarters, with children close by and oil lamps flickering through the night. Quirky tidbit: some Romans believed that dreams near fruit-bearing trees brought good luck or divine insight, especially if figs were involved. The storyteller pauses, and you notice a cat crawl into her lap, purring audibly. She keeps speaking, as if narrating to the feline as much as to the children. The fig tree rustles above, and you feel a breeze soft as silk glide past your skin. Time stretches, sounds blur. The city feels more like a lullaby than a location now. You rise once more and take the long route back toward the center, through stone arches and winding lanes. You see little snapshots of peace. A baker covering his dough for the morning rise. A scribe cleaning his brush beside a scroll. A soldier laying down his sword and whispering to a pigeon on his windowsill. You swear the pigeon nods. This city, you realize, wasn't just built brick by brick. It's lived moment by moment. And tonight, you're part of it. You find yourself beneath an archway now, where a wall relief catches your attention, a carving of Romulus and Remus, the mythic founders of Rome, suckling at the she-wolf. Even under moonlight, the stone seems alive with motion. You step closer and trace the curve of the she-wolf's fur with your gaze. Her face holds no menace, only a strangely maternal calm. Mainstream historical fact. The legend of Romulus and Remus was central to Roman identity, and statues or carvings depicting them could be found across the empire. Quirky tidbit. Some fringe theories suggest the tale of the she-wolf may have originated from a pun. Lupa, in Latin, was also slang for a prostitute, leading some to argue the boys may have been raised by a human she-wolf in Rome's underbelly. Yeah. Historians still argue whether the myth was ever truly believed, or whether it was just the Roman version of a national bedtime story, equal parts propaganda and poetry. You press forward, following the scent of something warm and grainy in the air. You round a corner and arrive at a public bakery, its coals still faintly glowing. A baker and her apprentice are shaping loaves for morning delivery. The dough is folded rhythmically, like a gentle kneading of the city's heartbeat. The baker nods to you and says something about how the best bread is made at night, while the world dreams. She isn't wrong. Mainstream historical fact. Ancient Roman bakeries were both private and communal. Some provided bread for entire neighborhoods, and city grain was rationed to ensure steady supply. Quirky tidbit. Some bakers use stamps to imprint loaves with the family's symbol or initials, creating the world's first branded bread. You linger by the warm oven, the heat radiating against your skin like a heavy blanket. The air smells of flour and soot, of long hours and quiet pride. A cat sleeps on a flour sack in the corner, its nose twitching as if it's dreaming of wheat fields. You turn toward a nearby aqueduct, silent now except for the trickling of water through mossy troughs. The structure towers over the buildings beside it, its graceful arches seemingly stretching into the stars. You walk alongside it, your fingers trailing along the cool stone. A torchlight flickers, casting your shadow in a long dance along the aqueduct wall. The water murmurs, telling stories of mountain springs and distant hills. Mainstream historical fact. Roman aqueducts could transport water across great distances with minimal slope, using gravity and engineering precision. Quirky tidbit. In some parts of the empire, local legends claimed aqueducts were haunted by water spirits, especially if construction disrupted sacred springs. You pause at a quiet overlook where the city opens below like a half-lidded eye. From this angle, it doesn't feel grand or imperial. It feels sleepy and content, like a cat curled in its own fur. Clay rooftops gleam with dew, and torchlight casts halos over rooftops like accidental halos. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks once, then stops, as if it, too, remembered the time and thought better of it. You descend into a lower neighborhood now, where the street is paved with uneven stones that wobble gently beneath your feet. Here, you pass a wall painted with faded frescoes, once bright, now ghostly. A woman in a green tunic is depicted pouring wine into a goblet, smiling at a man whose face has been nearly erased by time. A real man stands nearby, fixing a tile on the building. He smiles at you, then looks up at the woman on the wall and says, "She's prettier than me, right?" You nod. He laughs. Historians still debate how much individual Romans related to the art around them. Were the wall paintings personal, political, or merely decorative? A short walk later, you come across a public latrine. You hesitate, naturally, but curiosity wins. Inside, a few men sit silently, lost in thought. One is sketching with a charcoal nub on a wall. Another is reading a fragment of verse scratched into the plaster. You realize they're not just going about business. They're resting, contemplating, some even chatting softly, as if it were a park bench. Mainstream historical fact. Roman public toilets were communal, often without stalls, and doubled as informal social gathering places, sometimes even used for gossip or debates. Quirky tidbit. Sponges on sticks were used instead of toilet paper and shared communally, rinsed in vinegar. Not exactly luxurious. You retreat respectfully, heading back to the central plaza. The sky is lighter now, a dark ink fading into blue. A single morning star hangs stubbornly above the forum, blinking gently like it's not quite ready to sleep. On the steps of a temple, an old woman arranges herbs into small bundles. She hums a lullaby as she ties each one with thread. She catches your eye and tosses you a bundle of lavender. "For sleep," she whispers. You smell it and instantly understand. The scent wraps around your head like a lullaby woven in flowers. Everything is soft now. The air, the sky, your steps. The city has become a cradle, and you are tucked gently inside. The sky is rinsed with pale amber now, the kind of light that doesn't quite belong to night or day. You trudge down a narrow alley lined with faded murals and tiny clay lamps flickering on windowsills. The city is stirring, but only slightly, like someone shifting under warm covers. You breathe deeply. The air smells like yesterday's bread and cool stone. Ahead, you spot a work site where the very bones of the city are growing, brick by brick. A group of workers, their tunics tied high and sandals dusty, are already arranging materials for the day. One man lifts a brick and taps it gently with his knuckles, like he's checking a melon. He nods and places it carefully atop another. Mainstream historical fact: Roman bricks were standardized in size and often stamped with the mark of the legion or workshop that made them, making building faster and more uniform than in many other cultures of the time. Quirky tidbit: Romans sometimes used crushed pottery shards in their mortar, which gave it a reddish tint and surprisingly strong binding power. Some even say it helped structures breathe. Historians still argue whether Roman efficiency in construction was due to superior planning or sheer availability of cheap, sometimes enslaved, labor. You lean against a pile of limestone and watch for a while. One man whistles a tune. Another scratches his back with a chisel. Nobody seems rushed, but the wall rises all the same. Past the site, you find a small roadside shrine nestled between two buildings. It's dedicated to Lares, the guardian spirits of the household and street. Offerings of figs and bread crusts sit neatly in bowls. A child kneels beside it, eyes closed, whispering something you can't hear. Her father waits quietly behind her, arms crossed, head bowed. You leave a small pebble beside the offerings. It's all you have, but it feels right. Mainstream historical fact: Roman streets often featured small neighborhood shrines where locals made daily offerings to the Lares for protection and blessings. Quirky tidbit: Some Romans believed the Lares could get grumpy if neglected, leading to minor misfortunes like stubbed toes or sour milk. You stroll onward, past a pair of donkeys trotting by with jangling harnesses. A man in a red cloak waves and mutters something about needing better roads, which makes you chuckle. Some things never change. The road curves along the edge of a vegetable market, where a few stalls are beginning to set up. One vendor is arranging leeks with the precision of a mosaic artist. Another is yelling at a pigeon for stealing a fig. You watch the pigeon win and flap away triumphantly. You pause beside a well and watch an old woman draw water with a rope and clay bucket. She splashes a bit on the stones to settle the dust, then nods at you as if to say, "You're part of this too now." Mainstream historical fact: Roman cities relied on a combination of aqueducts, public fountains, and wells for water. Each neighborhood had its own rhythm of collection and use. Quirky tidbit: Some wells had coins tossed into them with whispered wishes. Centuries before modern wishing wells became common. Past the market. A man is sweeping his front step with a broom made of tied reeds. He hums a lullaby so sweet it makes your eyes sting. A cat twines around his legs. You're starting to think this might be the most tender city ever built by soldiers. You step into a bathhouse, still empty this early, and sit quietly on a bench. The walls are tiled with faded mosaics of dolphins and sea nymphs. A faint mist rises from the caldarium, the hot room. You feel its warmth creep into your bones. Mainstream historical fact: Roman bathhouses followed a specific order tepidarium, warm room, caldarium, hot room, and frigidarium, cold plunge, designed for cleansing and relaxation. Quirky tidbit: the Romans used strigils, curved metal tools, to scrape oil and dirt from their bodies instead of soap. Historians still debate whether bathhouses were more about hygiene or social life. Judging by the number of benches, you'd guess both, and as you dry your face with a piece of linen left behind, the light through the windows turns honey golden. Morning has fully arrived. The workers outside have formed a rhythm now. A thump, a lift, a splash of mortar, another brick, like a lullaby in reverse, waking the city instead of putting it to sleep. You walk back through the square and see a boy balancing on a barrel, pretending to be an emperor. His friend is announcing proclamations in a squeaky voice. A woman selling figs rolls her eyes, but smiles. You pass under a triumphal arch, newly painted with garlands. Someone must have cleaned it overnight. The marble gleams like a tooth. You touch it once, gently, like saying goodbye to a friend. And maybe you are. This city that was built slowly, deliberately, lovingly, has settled into your bones now. You won't forget the sound of its heartbeat. The streets are warming under your feet now, the early morning shadows retreating as the sun begins its gentle climb. You pass a man rubbing olive oil into a wooden cartwheel, humming under his breath, surrounded by the scent of citrus from nearby crates. The city isn't rushing, but it's alive, like a giant stretching after a good night's rest. Just ahead, a small crew of stonemasons begins shaping marble slabs. One lifts his chisel and strikes with practiced rhythm, the tap, tap, tap echoing like a heartbeat through the courtyard. You pause to watch. Their faces are set in calm concentration, each stroke deliberate. This is not the noise of haste. It's the music of permanence, mainstream historical fact. Roman cities often used travertine and marble in public buildings and temples, carving them with astonishing precision using only hand tools. Quirky tidbit: ancient Roman tools were sometimes so beloved by their owners that they would inscribe their names on them, or leave hidden jokes behind columns they installed. Historians still argue whether some of Rome's most beautiful ornamentations were truly appreciated by citizens at the time, or simply blended into the urban backdrop. You wander into a narrow colonnade where dappled light trickles through vine-covered beams. The stone columns are fluted and warm to the touch, worn smooth by centuries of brushing hands. You run your fingers over the grooves, imagining the people who've passed this way, carrying bread, water, gossip, secrets. Further down, a young girl balances a basket of apples on her head with a practiced wobble. She grins at you, missing a front tooth. Her tunic is too big, and her feet are bare, but her stride is confident. A man, her father, calls to her from a doorway, holding up a small loaf of bread like a prize. Mainstream historical fact: Roman street life was full of children, helping in markets, playing games like knuckle bones, or learning trades from their parents. Quirky tidbit: One of the most popular Roman toys was a tiny bronze dog on wheels that children would pull around with string. The street opens up into a forum, not the grand one you'd expect from textbooks, but a quieter, local version. A meeting space ringed by columns and modest statues. A few older men in weathered togas sit on a bench, arguing cheerfully about wheat prices. One swats another's knee and says something that makes them all laugh, and you catch only a word or two: emperor and lousy haircut. A nearby mural shows a mythological scene: Hercules carrying a donkey, for reasons unclear. You blink and chuckle. Historians still argue whether this particular story ever had deep meaning, or was just an excuse for a visual joke. A seller offers you a handful of dates, plucked fresh and sticky. You accept, and the sweetness bursts on your tongue. The taste is like time, slow, syrupy, and oddly grounding. You wave thanks with the back of your hand. Fingers sticky now. You pass a house with a mosaic floor visible through an open doorway. The pattern is geometric, hypnotic, and brilliant in the sunlight. A woman sweeps carefully around it, protecting each tile like it's part of a dream she once had. Her day yawns at the threshold. Mainstream historical fact: Roman homes often featured elaborate mosaics at their entrances and in dining areas, displaying wealth or personal taste. Quirky tidbit: some mosaics contained hidden messages or puns, like a fish made of bread loaves, or a chicken standing on top of a fox. The wind shifts. You catch the smell of firewood and roast onions from a kitchen. The scent slips through a side alley, where someone has strung linens between two walls like a canvas sky. A shirt flutters like it's dancing. A man steps out from his doorway to splash water on the stones and waves absently to you. You find yourself back near the construction site, where that wall is now noticeably taller. The rhythm continues. Tap, thump, scrape, breathe. A builder glances up and gives you a nod. It's the kind of nod that says, "Yeah, we're getting there." You sit on a low wall and watch for a while, letting the sound settle into your chest. It feels like a lullaby played backward, starting from silence and slowly waking you up. You smile and lean back, eyes drifting skyward. Above, a pair of doves land on a ledge. One drops a twig, the other nudges it into place. Nest building, city building, people and birds, and you sigh softly. All of it takes time. The forum behind you fades as your feet take you deeper into the city's winding arteries. A group of craftsmen are hunched over in a shaded portico, painting decorative terracotta tiles. Their robes are stained in shades of ochre and plum, and the air smells faintly of vinegar and smoke. One of them, a round-faced man with eyebrows like hedgerows, whistles as he works, leaving small handprints on the rim of his apron. His tile shows a lion, not a fearsome beast, but one with a sleepy eye and its tongue sticking out. You grin. Mainstream historical fact: Roman builders often included decorative terracotta pieces in roofing and facades, some with mythological or humorous designs. Quirky tidbit: Some ancient Roman tiles were stamped with the name of the construction team or even a joke, like a grumpy face with the word Monday. Historians still argue whether these artistic flourishes were directed by elite patrons or came from the imaginations of the workers themselves. As you continue down a sloped road lined with cypress trees, your sandals scuff at the gravel. There's a small fountain ahead, gurgling softly in the late afternoon warmth. A bronze dolphin spouts a steady stream of water into a wide stone basin. You kneel to touch it. The water is cool, and a fish darts past your fingers. A woman in a flowing russet tunic is filling a clay jug beside you. She hums an old lullaby as her child, barefoot and sticky-faced, chews on a bit of honeyed flatbread. She offers a smile, and you return it. Both of you drinking in the slow hush of the moment like it's tea. Mainstream historical fact: Roman cities were dotted with public fountains and aqueduct-fed basins for people to collect fresh water daily. Quirky tidbit: some fountains were decorated with cheeky figures like fauns or satyrs who appeared to urinate the water stream. Down a short flight of steps, you find yourself in a courtyard surrounded by tiled roofs and balconies wrapped in grapevines. An old man tends to his potted herbs, rosemary, basil, lavender, whispering to them in Latin like they're naughty children. He leans on his cane to look at you and says, "Pulchrum diem, eh?" You nod. A beautiful day indeed. The late sun slants across the cobblestones now, creating a long golden thread that pulls you forward. You follow it into a quieter part of town where the din of tools has softened. The buildings are more modest here: bakers' homes, cobblers' shops, tailors with tunics pinned in their windows. There's a warmth here, not just in the stone, but in the air, the smells, the rhythm of the people. You pass a bakery where the aroma of sweet fig cakes and barley loaves wafts out. A line of neighbors waits patiently, exchanging gossip about someone's third cousin who once fell off a mule into the Tiber. A woman behind you mutters, "He deserved it," and you nearly choke on a laugh. Mainstream historical fact: Roman bakeries were neighborhood staples, often with attached mills and communal ovens used by multiple families. Quirky tidbit: some bakers added lead weights to their bread to cheat customers out of proper portions, an act that could get them fined or whipped. Historians still argue whether the scent of bread baking was a common comfort or a rare luxury, especially for the lower classes. Farther down the alley, you glimpse a mosaic sign outside a barber's shop. A razor blade and a bowl. Inside, a young man is carefully shaving an older patron's beard with a bone-handled razor. They're both laughing about something you can't quite hear. You catch your reflection in the shop's bronze mirror, dusty, smiling, wide-eyed. You look like someone living here, not just visiting. Evening arrives like a velvet curtain slowly being drawn. Torches begin to flicker along the walls, casting long shadows and deep oranges across the stone. A woman sits in her doorway, threading a needle by the last of the sunlight. A dog snores nearby, and a cat flicks its tail atop a windowsill. half listening to a lullaby being sung in the next house. You hear it. Dormi, dormi, parvulus. The child's voice sings the tune imperfectly, but earnestly, each word curling into the night air like smoke from a hearth. You pause by a small temple. The door is closed, but you can see the flickering votive lamps inside. Someone has left a bowl of grapes on the steps, a quiet offering to whichever deity lives here. Or maybe just to the peace of the evening itself. The stone bench nearby invites you, and you accept. The city exhales with you. Slow and long, you lean back and close your eyes. The hum of the city wrapping around you like a warm cloak. You rise from the bench with a stretch, joints quietly cracking like the creak of an old wooden door. The city of stone and soot and lavender wind is now wrapped in dusk's embrace. You follow a narrow path upward, toward a terrace where the rooftops fan out like a mosaic. The air carries with it the scent of rosemary and warm clay, and a distant flute winds through the alleys, a song for no one in particular. At the edge of the terrace, a pair of engineers are carefully unfurling a scroll. The parchment flutters like a restless bird in the breeze. One man is bald, with sunburned cheeks. The other is young with a stylus tucked behind his ear. They're sketching the plan for a new bathhouse, measuring columns with knotted cords and murmuring about plumbing angles. Mainstream historical fact. Roman engineers used detailed plans and standardized measurements when designing their aqueducts, roads, and public buildings. Quirky tidbit. Some Roman plans were etched in wax tablets and reused by scraping off the wax with the back of a stylus. Historians still argue whether Roman engineers were more precise than modern architects, or simply more poetic in their improvisations. As you peer over their shoulders, you imagine the space coming alive. Tiled floors warmed from beneath by hypocausts, steam rising from marble basins, laughter echoing against domed ceilings. A bathhouse was never just for bathing. It was social, political, sacred, a meeting place of flesh and thought. You step away and descend through a row of laurel bushes. A street performer is juggling clay pots in the square below, attracting a crowd of cheerful children and skeptical pigeons. With every toss and spin, he grins, though a fine sheen of sweat betrays his effort. A little boy claps so hard he falls over. The pot lands with a thunk, unbroken. Applause erupts. The performer bows, steals a fig from someone's basket, and vanishes into the crowd. Mainstream historical fact. Roman street performers often entertained in markets and festivals with juggling, acrobatics, and comedic sketches. Quirky tidbit. Some Roman clowns wore pointed hats and grotesque masks, the ancestors of today's slapstick comedy. You wander past the commotion into an older part of the city, where murals peel from stucco walls like memories. Here, the buildings lean just slightly, like tired friends holding one another up. A small dog trots past, ears perked and tail wagging as if it has somewhere very important to be. As you follow the winding street, a scent of grilled fish and spiced lentils pulls you toward a corner tavern. The proprietor, a short man with a voice like gravel, invites you with a wink. Inside, the tables are crowded with workers, mud on their boots, laughter in their bellies. You find a quiet seat and sip watered wine. It tastes like sun and clay and old secrets. A pair of farmers argue loudly about grain prices, while a traveling bard begins to strum a lyre in the corner. He sings of the founding of the city, of wolves and twins and a sword drawn in sand. The tale changes with each stanza, and no one corrects him. It's not about accuracy, it's about rhythm. Mainstream historical fact: Roman taverns, or popinae, were lively centers for food, drink, and local gossip, often serving the working class. Quirky tidbit: some taverns were so rowdy that emperors banned soldiers from entering them while off duty. Historians still argue whether these taverns helped spread political ideas or simply distracted people with good stew and bad music. As the bard's melody drifts into the evening, you step outside once more. The moon has risen, pale and plump above the rooftops. Its glow silvers the tiles and gives the ivy a sheen of magic. You follow a final path that winds behind the houses, past old stone walls and olive trees. There's a garden here, silent but alive. Bees sleep beneath the leaves. A tortoise makes its slow pilgrimage from shadow to moonlight. You sit at the garden's edge. A nearby statue, perhaps of a minor god or a forgotten poet, watches you without judgment. You rest your palm against the warm earth and feel the thrum of 1,000 years beneath your skin. The city is quiet now, truly. No hammering, no merchants, no children's laughter. Only the pulse of Rome itself. You breathe it in. The stone, the dust, the stories. They're part of you now, stitched into your thoughts like golden thread. You close your eyes, and in that moment, you realize something simple and profound. Nothing here was rushed, and the city was made of moments just like this. Small, quiet, persistent, and slowly, gently. The city built you too, and you linger in the moonlit garden, letting the silence press softly against your skin. Somewhere behind you, a nightbird calls, a low, warbling note, answered by another in the distance. The garden wall is warm from the day's sun, and when you lean back against it, it feels almost like a hug. Your fingertips rest on the edge of a broken amphora, now half buried among lavender, a spider with great purpose threads its silk between two chipped handles. Above, stars blink shyly into view, one by one. The constellation of Virgo hovers to the east, her shape unmistakable in the clear Roman sky. You try to recall her myth. Was she a goddess of justice? A harvest maiden? You're not sure anymore, but she looks peaceful up there, detached, watching over a world built brick by people who tried their best. Mainstream historical fact: the Romans often named streets and plazas after constellations and celestial bodies, believing the heavens mirrored the city below. Quirky tidbit: Roman astrologers were so popular that Emperor Tiberius kept one at court, though he once had another executed for an inconvenient prediction. Historians still argue whether the Romans truly believed in fate written in stars, or simply enjoyed the poetry of pretending. You rise again, just to stretch your legs, and take a last slow walk past a weathered column that leans slightly toward the alley. Moss creeps up its base like time itself, steady and unbothered. It bears a chisel mark, just a tiny dent, but you wonder about it. Was it a slip of the hand? A bored apprentice? A protest? Past the column, you enter a narrow street lit by a single oil lamp swinging gently in the breeze. Its flame flickers, casting long shadows that stretch and shrink like ghostly dancers. You remember walking this same road earlier in the day, bustling with workers and wagons. Now, the stones are yours. Each footstep echoes a little louder, and you find yourself tiptoeing as if to not wake the past. A stray cat crosses your path, tail high. It pauses, looks at you, then disappears between shutters. It doesn't need your approval, and it certainly doesn't fear your judgment. It's just Roman, independent, sleepy, and slightly smug. Eventually, you find yourself at the edge of the Forum again, the grand center of civic life. In the dark, it's transformed. The marble temples and public halls loom like mountains, their columns no longer white and proud, but gray-blue and dreaming. You step closer and hear a faint breeze whistle through the portico. Mainstream historical fact. The Roman Forum was once the heart of the Republic, the Empire, and countless speeches, trials, and ceremonies. Quirky tidbit. For centuries, people thought the Forum was a goat pasture. It was only properly excavated in the 19th century. You sit on a crumbled step beside the temple of Saturn, the god of time, wealth, and silent wisdom. He's lost his hands, but not his authority. He stares into the distance, frozen forever, mid-thought. You wonder what he would say if he could speak. Would he praise what they built, or weep for what was lost? Your thoughts drift to mortar and aqueducts, to bathhouses and bread ovens, to lovers carving initials into amphorae, to senators with sweaty togas and potters with cracked nails, to children chasing hoops in the dirt, to the hundreds of thousands of lives, all layered into these stones like sediment. And then, quite without warning, your body grows heavy, your arms sink into your lap, your breath slows, your eyes blur just a little, enough to turn marble into clouds and shadow into memory. So you lie back, not on a bed, but on the firm embrace of the earth itself. The stars above, the columns beside, the ancient warmth beneath your spine. And you let the city, that soft-spoken builder of centuries, cradle you. Now, as the final sounds of the Roman night settle around you, gentle breeze through olive leaves, the last click of a distant sandal, you feel the edges of consciousness soften. Every moment you've wandered through tonight, from the clang of iron tools to the hush of candlelight, begins to float gently into the background. Like a slow tide drawing away from the shore. The noise, the motion, the world itself retreats just far enough to leave peace behind. Your breath is steady now, rising and falling like the domes and arches of the ancient skyline. Inhale the scent of lavender and clay. Exhale the bustle of empire. Your limbs are heavy but calm, like marble warmed by the sun. Let your thoughts flicker, the way torchlight dances on temple walls. If they drift toward distant ruins or freshly laid cobblestones, let them wander gently across time and history, unbothered and unhurried. There is nothing left to see tonight, nothing left to learn, nothing more to build. The city has done its work, and so have you. And as you lie there, wrapped in the hush of Roman twilight, let go of your day. Let go of your questions. Let go of the bricks. Sleep now, gentle traveler. End of script. Sweet dreams.